1-2, the day the mail-order bride was abandoned was the same day. The wind refused to rest over the plains, carrying dust like whispers of cruelty across the ranch lands. And no one noticed her except the silent rancher who lived 3 miles beyond the last fence where hope usually died. Her name was Clara, though no one bothered to ask, dressed in a faded blue dress torn at the hem, hands trembling as she stood beside a wagon that had left her behind, like spoiled cargo, promised to a neighbor who took one look at her quiet eyes and thin frame, and decided she was not worth the trouble, shouting that she was useless, weak and better off gone before, ordering his men to drag her away and throw her into the old mine pit on the edge of his land, a place where screams were swallowed and bones were forgotten. The rancher, known only as Eli, watched from a distance, his face carved by years of silence and loss. A man who spoke little, because words had once failed him when his family burned in a winter fire, and since then he trusted only actions. When Clara was shoved toward the pit, fear froze her breath, but she did not scream, because life had taught her screaming changed nothing, and as her body fell into darkness, striking rock and dirt, pain exploded through her legs and back, yet still she made no sound, believing this was simply how her story ended, alone and unwanted. Above ground, laughter faded. Boots walked away, and the pit returned to silence. But then there was another sound. Slow footsteps, deliberate, heavy. Eli had already tied a rope around his waist. His jaw clenched as if he were descending into his own past, lowering himself into the mine without hesitation, because something in the way she had fallen without a cry broke something open inside him. When he reached her, she lay twisted, blood staining the dirt, eyes wide but dry. And when she saw him, she did not beg, did not plead, only whispered, "I'm sorry to be trouble." And that single sentence shattered the walls around his heart more violently than the fire ever had. He lifted her carefully, every movement gentle despite his rough hands, hauling her up inch by inch, refusing to let go even when the rope cut into his skin. And when he finally carried her into his cabin, setting her beside the hearth, cleaning her wounds, feeding her warm broth, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile understanding, born not of words but of shared brokenness. Days passed, then weeks. Clara healed slowly, helping when she could, cooking simple meals, mending clothes, never asking for anything. And Eli found himself listening for her footsteps, noticing the way light returned to the cabin when she smiled softly at small things, like birds on the sill or rain tapping the roof. And though he never said it, he realized he had gone down into that pit not just to save a woman, but to rescue the last piece of himself that still believed in love. Chapter 2. Winter came hard and early, and with it the past refused to stay buried as the neighbor who had discarded. Clara discovered she was alive and demanded her return, claiming ownership, riding up to Eli's cabin with men and guns, calling her nothing more than purchased property. But Clara stood behind Eli without fear, because the silence he wrapped around her felt safer than any promise ever had. And when Eli finally spoke, his voice rough, unused but unbreakable, he said simply that no one who throws a soul into darkness deserves to claim it again. Violence followed, the kind born from pride and cruelty. And when shots rang out, Eli shielded Clara, taking a bullet through his shoulder, refusing to fall, driving the men away with sheer will until they fled into the snow, leaving behind threats that echoed hollow against the truth now standing between Eli and Clara. As he collapsed, bleeding, she held him, tears finally breaking free, begging him not to die. And for the first time, he allowed himself to rest in someone's arms, realizing love was not loud declarations or perfect beginnings, but choosing someone again and again even when the world tried to tear them apart. Weeks later, as his wound healed and spring crept back into the land, Clara no longer moved like someone waiting to be thrown away, and Eli no longer lived like a man already buried. And though they never needed grand ceremonies or witnesses, the cabin became their promise, built from shared meals, quiet evenings, and the understanding that they had both survived the pit, the fire and the silence together. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Eli finally asked her if she wished to stay, and she answered not with words, but by taking his hand, placing it over her heart, where love now beat strong and certain, proving that sometimes the deepest romances are born not from being chosen first, but from being rescued last. And in that lonely cabin on the edge of the world, two abandoned souls found a forever neither had dared to imagine. Spring did not come gently that year. It arrived with storms that tore across the plains as if the land itself was testing whether love born from darkness deserved to survive the light. And with each passing day, Eli sensed that peace was fragile, because the world rarely forgives happiness found by those it once tried to break. Rumors spread fast in small frontier towns. Whispers about the silent rancher who stole another man's bride, about the woman who should have died in the mine but returned like a ghost, wrapped in kindness. And Clara felt those whispers like cold fingers on her back whenever she rode into town for supplies, though she never told Eli, choosing instead to smile and pretend she was stronger than fear, just as she had learned to do all her life. One afternoon, while Eli repaired a fence far from the cabin, strangers arrived, men with polished boots and clean hands, carrying papers stamped with authority, claiming the mine pit held more than broken rocks, that it concealed valuable ore, and that the land was now under dispute, its ownership questioned, its past dug up just like Clara's trauma. And when Eli returned to find them standing too close to her, something dark and protective ignited inside him, because silence had once cost him everything, and he would not let it cost him her. The men spoke of laws and claims, but Eli spoke with action, escorting them off his land with a warning carved not from threats, but certainty. Yet that night he could not sleep, knowing powerful men did not retreat so easily. And as rain hammered the roof, Clara confessed her fear, not of losing the cabin, but of being the reason Eli lost everything, saying she would leave if it meant saving him, that she had survived abandonment before, but could not survive being the cause of another man's ruin. Eli listened, then for the first time told her about the fire, about the screams he never answered fast enough, about the silence he chose because words felt like lies after that night. And he told her that saving her from the pit had saved him from living like he was already dead, that losing her would be the true ruin, not land or blood or law. Days later, the men returned with hired guns, and this time there was no negotiation. Only chaos, shots cracking the air, horses screaming, the cabin splintering under violence. And when one of the men grabbed Clara, dragging her toward the mine as if fate were circling back for its due, Eli did not hesitate, charging forward despite pain still lingering in his shoulder, taking a beating that cracked ribs and blurred vision, yet refusing to fall, because love had taught him something pain never could, that some things are worth bleeding for. Clara fought too, striking back, screaming for the first time in her life, not in fear but fury. And when Eli finally drove them, away by sheer defiance and the threat of witnesses gathering, the men retreated, vowing they would return through courts if not guns, leaving destruction behind them like a warning. In the aftermath, as Eli lay bruised and shaking, Clara tended his wounds with trembling hands, realizing love was not safety but courage shared. And that night she made a choice, not to run, not to hide, but to stand beside him no matter the cost, because the pit no longer owned her story. Weeks passed. The legal threat faded as claims collapsed under scrutiny. The mine declared worthless after all, and slowly the land exhaled, peace returning not as silence but as earned quiet. And on a morning bathed in gold, Eli built a new fence near the pit, sealing it forever, while Clara watched, knowing some graves were meant to stay closed. When he finished, he took her there, not to remember pain but to mark survival. And as he carved their initials into a post facing the horizon, she realized love had not erased her scars. It had given them meaning. And in that vast, unforgiving land, where people were thrown away like tools, two souls had chosen each other not because it was easy, but because it was true, proving that even the deepest pits cannot swallow a heart that refuses to stop loving.